It's presentation time.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Welcome to the second part this afternoon of our Congress. And our next speaker will be Eleni Ralli. Yes, Eleni.
Yeah.
And she was, of course, Harry Partch is her theme. And I want to tell some words about Eleni Ralli. She is Greek, a composer and researcher. She received bachelor and master degrees in composition, music theory, and musicology from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in 2013, and in Basel, Bale, in the Music Academy in 2016, and in Bern University 2018. Congratulations. Currently, she is proceeding with a PhD in composition in Basel and Thessaloniki and in Bern University. She's researching the American composer Harry Partch, of course. She has presented her ongoing research in festivals like our Symposium and Fermentationstage in Basel in January 2015, and in the IGNM in Basel. And among her papers are Harry Partch, of course, in the lexicon article, and an article parallels and modifications of notation in different sources of Harry Partch's 17 lyrics by LiPo. That's an important piece, the 17 lyrics by Partch. Navid, Schwierigkeiten und Transkriptionsvorschläge belongs to this, difficulties and proposals for transcription. But very nice theme, it means der doppelte Po und die Musik. I translate the doubled Po and the Musik, and this concerns Chinese and Rätoromanisch studies. Rätoromanisch is a dialect, it's its own language in Switzerland, with LiPo and Kaspar Po in Switzerland. Harry Partch's enigmatic musical notation was published in the HKB Zeitung of Helvetia. And on the benefit of notating Harry Partch's music for understanding and analyzing his harmonic language, that was published here in a symposium. You'll see, recognize here. That's all belongs to Harry Partch and his compositions, the early compositions. As a composer, Eleni Ralli has attended many workshops, seminars, and master classes for contemporary music, and in addition, professional ensembles and festivals regularly commission pieces from her. Her works had been performed just around the world. She is founding member of the ensemble False Relationships and the Extended Endings, founded in 2019, last 2 years ago, concentrating and performing contemporary music and located in Germany, Switzerland, and France. And now will be again Harry Partch 17 lyrics by LiPo, but similarities and differences in the notations of 2 of the 6 in total different versions of his early work. And questions will be discussed, difficulties, and she proposes transcriptions. And now we are very exhausted and curious to your lecture, Eleni.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I will start sharing my screen, and I think that it is very good that we started with some kind of biographical information. You can all see my PowerPoint, right? Yes?
Yeah, yes, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. How many pages can you see? 1 or 2?
2.
Okay.
One big one and a small one, and then all the sides.
Okay. So I have I should do the slide. So now it's better?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity that I'm given. It's very nice to see you all. Unfortunately, it's the modus of online, but it serves my purpose because I am for my research semester in the US now. And this presentation is only one part of a bigger work that I did like the last year concerning the early work of Harry Partch 70 lyrics by LiPo. And you will see here a kind of a first approach in two versions of the total 6 that the piece has. As you know, Harry Partch, he was a maverick composer and theoretician and an instrument constructor. He lived from 1901 to 1974 in many areas in the US, and actually he constructed his own instruments, his own scale based on 43 non-equidistant tones per octave, and for that he made his own composition. One very common characteristic among all the more or less 40 works of Harry Partch is that he used to rework the pieces in later times, and most of the times he changed the instrumentation according to the instruments he had constructed in the meantime, or he constructed bigger forms using earlier works as basis for bigger theatrical pieces. This piece has the unique identity that it didn't change the instrumentation over the years, and it's actually considered one of the first pieces that he composed with his new system, and his first instrument at that time, which was the adapted viola. He composed pieces earlier in his life, but in the end of 20s, he burned them all, and then he started going into the direction of the musical composition production as we know it today from the Partch musical language. So today I will deal only with the two first versions. And I would like to start with a citation. I don't know if you can see. Can you see? Like, is it okay for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so throughout history, the monophonic concept has been consistently manifested through one medium, the individual spoken words, which are more settled the Jews of a given identity than anything else in the tonal world. The intense mood created in Japanese and Chinese drama with a single instrument and voice should deter us from feeling sorry for the Greeks because they developed no symphony orchestra, but use only a lyre or kithara, or occasionally a reed pipe. And this describes not only his concept of monophony, but also the basis of this piece, which is the spoken voice, the intonation of the voice, plus one instrument as accompaniment, which is the adapted viola. For anyone that wants to see extra information concerning all the versions of the piece, either you can text me or you can go to Thomas McGarry. He has a catalog with all the pieces and giving signed information also about the manuscripts, and it's called Harry Partch Descriptive Catalog. These are the pages where you can find it. And why? Okay, so first of all, I want to say that it is a circle of songs, okay, on the poet Libai, okay, from 701 to 762, in an English translation of Sigyosi Obata, I don't know if I speak that correctly, from 1922. And the characteristic is that the first 4 versions are all worked around the same time in the beginning of 30s, but they are not all the same piece, which is actually why I couldn't make comparisons on the same piece, because as you see in 31, there were the first version, only 3 pieces, second 6 pieces, 4 and 4 in third and fourth version, and all of them are 17 in total, okay, which he collected all together in the first version, 44, 45, and of course the last one that we have today, it's from 1962. Where the question mark exists is following. In the archive, they are registered as undated, but Thomas McGarry gives a date in his catalog. So I don't know how he ended up in giving a date, but they are listed as undated, so I keep the date of Thomas McGarry with a question mark because I don't know if it corresponds to the truth. So I wanted to go a little bit through all the notation systems because these systems are represented in all Harry Partch works. You know the ratios that he used, and he used the ratios in all the versions of the piece, all 6 of them. Then tablatures, the tablatures are dependent on his instruments. Every instrument has a different tablature, and most of the times, as we know, it is the position on the instrument that the instrumentalist should hit or play or pluck, and the sound result that is coming is something different. Then he used this is also referring to all versions of the piece, the approximated notation in 5-line stave, which we know as the timbre 12-tone notation, are in versions A, the first one, E and F, and the 2 last versions, we will see that. The chromo notation, which is a kind of special tablature notation, the chromo melodion is one of his instruments that actually is a harmonium of reeds, pipes, which actually are tuned in his 43-tone scale. That means that the whole octave is reached after 44 keys and has a stable intonation. So the chromo notation is which key actually the pianist or the keyboard player should hit on the chromelodion, and of course the sound result is different. The advantage of this instrument is that it has a fixed notation, so it is used until nowadays to tune the whole ensemble of his instruments. And the extended 5-line notation, for the chromo notation, it is used in versions E and F, but not as an actual instrument that is participating, but just as an intonation instrument for the voice, which is not there in the first 4 versions. And the extended 5-line notation, it's kind between a tablature and a correspondence to actual pitches. There are actually 5 parallel double lines, and this is something that from all the pieces of Partch, I've seen only in this piece in version C and never again. If anyone else has a different knowledge, we can go to that. And here I wanted a little bit to represent the instruments for the people that don't know. On the upper left corner, you see the original. As you see, I'm not sure if it's very clear from the photo. You have this kind of points on the fret, on the neck, sorry, it's unfretted, of course, and you see that it's a bigger viola. It's called adapted viola. It's a body of viola with the neck of the cello. For many of you that you know, down you see the reconstructed instrument by Musikfabrik. They have remade the whole instrumentarium in 2013. You see exactly the same marks. And here, sorry, you see the chromelodion. Unfortunately, I found only a black and white photo here of the original. That's why I brought also the images of the new constructive instruments by Musikfabrik. As you can see here on the keyboard, you have different colors representing the ratios. Okay, and every key, okay, is having a different ratio that represents one of the tones of the 43-tone scale. And of course, you have the possibility of different registers that either giving a higher or a lower octave or 6 to 5 thirds, and they can use in combinations. So I'm coming here to the first version. Can you see the score clearly enough? Is it okay? Okay, I guess so, if no one is speaking. So, an encounter...
Yes, it's okay, thank you.
Okay, the important thing for me from an artistic aspect when I started dealing with Partch's music, but I was not aware of what happens with the ratios, is for me to trying to understand what am I expected to hear. And sometimes for me it was clear, but sometimes it was not. So let's say you are all specialists, but we are coming outside of this microtonal context. What can we see in this information? So first of all, we have rhythm. Okay, we can see that we have rhythmic values. We can see that we don't have measure, we don't have tempo, we don't have any other performance notes. Okay, but we have 5-line staves that are defined according to the phrase in the text. Okay, and we have the approximate 12-tone notation. So for someone with not extending knowledge, you can see the voice leading. Okay, then we have extra symbols. We have the ratios above. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we have ratios above the voice, which give the exact, high of the voice. And then we have ratios below, which are representing to the melody of the adapted viola. And then here we have Arabic numbers. I will come to that, but this is something for me that it is very clear also for someone that does not have extended knowledge or does not know how the ratios work to kind of follow. I would like to play you that, if it's, let's see.
An encounter in the sea.
Can you hear or not? Is it good?
Yes, absolutely fine. I heard it.
Okay.
A benevolent rider, trampling the fallen flowers of the road. The dangling end of his crop brushes a passing carriage of 5-colored clouds. The jeweled curtain is raised. A beautiful woman smiles within. Thank you, sweetheart, she whispered, pointing to a pink house beyond.
So this is the first version. I think, of course, the text is very indicative. That is very, very easy to follow. But this is the very first page of version A. And for me, this raised questions. So I tried to see what he meant. For example, when he writes to, of course, it's clear for many of you, but for me, it was not in the beginning. So I looked for the later versions, and here we have version B. It is, as you see, dedicated to Rudolf Radil. I think he performed the piece and some other parts he dedicated to them in the performance of New Music Society in 1932. And this is, I will not look into the dream, but as the first song of the cycle in version B, it has some performance notes, and as you see, he writes them in the corners. He gives some extra information. So you see here that he has the range. The Arabic numbers are, of course, the octave, and the ratios, and or about, he gives also the approximate notation in timbre notes. And if we go to the left side, you see here that he explains the octaves. Here in Latin, he has the strings. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, it's a little bit unconventional because the first string is the lowest for him, while we use in today's context, the first is the highest. What is a rest? What is a sudden break? And here it has to do with the rhythm. Of course, we will not see that in the version that I chose to show you, which is the version B, and it's the long departed lover. So here, as you can see, there is a complete absence of 5-line stave. The notation is on a black paper, purely in ratios and very linear. For me, it was difficult to see the voice leading what is happening, because we have to actually calculate the ratios or see the ratio, or if you know them by heart, of course, we know which are the pitches that are represented. But for someone that sees the score for the first time, the version is clearly more difficult to decode than the first one. What he's doing here is following. He is treating both voices, I mean, the voice and the adapted viola, as kind of solistic instruments. And as you see here, he starts with monochord, which is the adapted viola, and then the voice, and then again the monochord, and then the voice. Of course, there are points where these two meet, and here, which is something he does not do in the previous version, because the voice and the instrument run parallel, but not on the same pitch. But here he uses points where they have exactly the same pitch so that the voice can tune. And I think this is what he did in order to facilitate the performer by the instrument. Of course, Partch performed most of his pieces by himself, of course the bigger pieces also with colleagues and friends, but this song is mainly made so that he could sing and accompany himself with the adapted viola. I think Johnny did a version, a very nice version, where there are two people performing that. There is a singing boy and someone play the viola. I don't know if I remember that correct. And I highlighted this point because I will come to the transcription. You see here that it's 16 to 11, which is taking over the voice. 4 to 3 here, the ratio is changing for the voice, but not for the viola. And then they both conclude in 11 to 8, I cannot sleep. I will go further to play a different performance of John Snyder from 2019 on the piece.
Farewell. When you were here, I filled the house with flowers. Farewell, now you are gone, only an empty couch is left. On the couch, the embroidered quilt is rolled up. I cannot sleep. It is 3 years since you went. The perfume you left behind haunts me still. The perfume strays about me forever. But where are you, beloved? I sigh. The yellow leaves fall from the branch. I weep. The dew twinkles white on the green mosses.
So now I'm coming to the part of the transcription, and I didn't want to show anything from me because I discovered some interesting things that I want this to be the initial point where we get to discussion, is kind of how can we transcribe this music so that we know what is sounding, or that we can reproduce it by other instruments. So here you see a Bob Gilmore's transcription from the beginning of the 90s. And the most interesting thing is that he took the B version, the original version. And this point, I cannot sleep, is highlighted as you see. And what he's doing is he's using the tempered notation in 12 steps, but he's writing the sense approximation and the ratio number on the top. So we have 3 different levels of information, and you see here, okay, which is the main interval where the voice is almost returning what it seems to be the same, okay, but it's not, is this, because it is D flat, but it's not the same D flat. There is the 16 to 11 D flat and the 11 to 8 D flat. So we need all this information to be accurate of how we perform that. Going further, I wanted to show only the last version, the F of this piece. And what he's doing here is he is using the chromelodion as the intonation instrument. And as you see here, this is not the sounding pitch, but this is the key. It should be pressed, okay, to tune the voice. This position exactly which is marked is not supported by the chromelodion. So we have here the adapted viola and we have the voice, but we don't have the intonation by the assistant instrument. And I will come to something I recently discovered because I'm doing now archive research. There is an extensive correspondence from the beginning of the 80s between Johnson, we talk about Harbach, Polanski, Cameron, Austin Bem, and Granner about how it is possible to renotate this piece. In the 80s, they started a bigger project, first of all, to collect the archive in one institution. What's happened nowadays, it's in University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, all private collections and the State Archive. The second was to do a full edition of Harry Partch's works with the transcriptions. Unfortunately, this did not happen due to logistics. The third was to do a series of oral history tapes. This was made with Ben Johnston and Thomas McGarry. There is kind of a very extensive archive of history tapes, and of course to reconstruct the instruments so that they have a second setup to use for performances. This also didn't take place, but an attempt to renotate the whole LiPo series did take place, and there is an extensive correspondence between people involved of what is the problematic. And as you see here, Janet Cameron did the notes, and he found these two following problems in the log departed lover. There are like multiple pages with different questions on each song of the versions, but I would like to take a look at that because it refers exactly to that point. Page 1, System 3 voice part. The chromelodion notation and the words "I cannot sleep" has been omitted in the manuscript. It is likely the parts intended the pitch D, lower 16 to 11, which appear in the viola part under the word I, because the viola and voice have entered in unison up to this point. The same argument applies to the C 4 to 3 under Ken. However, it is unclear what pitch parts intended under sleep, for he uses the same approximate pitch as under I, the approximate pitch. D 16 to 11 and C higher 11 to 8 are the two pitches most likely intended. The higher C corresponds to the viola pitch and has thus been used in the transcriptions. So we will go to C. This is the Ben Johnston notation. I think we heard or Mark this morning. I think more of you are familiar with the notation. So we will go to see which transcription Ben Johnston proposed. And as you see here, the first and the last note are not these anymore, but it's a more accurate approximation to the actual ratios used. But here we don't have cents and we don't have the ratios, which takes something, according to my opinion, from the original parts notation as well. Of course, if someone knows the ratio that is always represented by every symbol, then you can decode this version. More exact in the actual microtonal notation, but still I think it's missing something. So I think that this is the last slide that I wanted to present, and I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to open the discussion about how we renotate microtonal music and which is more accurate way, or if we should do it at all or not. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleni. Thank you. Thank you. It was most interesting to look at all the notations Harry Partch himself made, and I congratulate you for your work. What you are doing is a great job to make this notation understandable to us. Just you did it in some examples, and I wonder what will be the result in the end of all your engagement. I hope that will be a complete notation from Harry Partch's oeuvre already with all instruments, but I think that will be really impossible. Do you share his opinion?
Of course, I think that pretty much all of you are familiar with the work of Harry Partch, and he wanted to be an outsider, and he managed that, and he had his notation because this represented his compositional ideas, but also his instruments. So he was against any renotation, but I discovered a letter of Ben Johnston in the 80s that he said that he met with Harry Partch a little bit before he died, and he showed him his notation system, and Harry Partch said that, yeah, I agree that you can use this system for renotating my music, but this is something that Ben Johnston says, and I didn't find any validation of Partch. I mean, it's kind of
Right.
and I wonder if someone like he had like a very difficult health condition most of his life, but especially during the last year, if this was his first concern, or if Ben Johnson is telling the truth or not. But I don't think it has to do with that. It has to do with that which could be a different language where we can bring these pieces if we are not very familiar with the ratio notation, but especially ratios is something that we can all learn, especially with the tablature, and this is the problem in Harry Partch instrument. If you have an instrument in tablature, of course, you can always read the book and have reference, but we don't have physical access to the instruments because they are not existing. So how can we perceive the music from the recording and from the score without having physical access to the instrument? I mean, I've seen Johnny here, and I called him many times because he dealt a lot with Partch's music and also with recordings. Maybe he can make some comment on that. For me, it is the big question. In what extent can we renotate it, be accurate enough of all these kind of fluctuations of the intoning voice, because that was his intention anyway, to be accurate, but also to make it kind of readable in people that don't have that extended knowledge, or they don't know the tablature systems for the instruments.
Will be a lot of work to do. I think Harry Partch described his notations with undertone series and overtone series, and so there are a lot of series. That's not only on his basic tone G he always uses, but there are several undertone and overtone series, and perhaps this will be a key to make a notation, an exact notation. Could it be?
I mean, I forgot to tell you, this is also another problematic. Of course, he has G as central tone that is 1-1, and it is called, I don't know, because you mentioned that, but I didn't. I don't know if it's accurate enough, but he ended up in having a tuning fork in G. And this is why he ended up having that as a basis of the system. Other corrections in other songs of the collection have exactly this problem, that he uses ratios that are outside his 43-tone system. And this is always the question of in what extent does that apply to his whole work. Of course, the first pieces were only in primary tonalities and with 29 tones, and then he extended that above 43, and then he ended up in 43. But if you also see in the guitar, the slides, you end up sometimes in positions where you have ratios outside his 43-tone system. And this is a question of if he wanted that, but he never actually do it consistently, or he wanted something that is approximately to a ratio that is existing, but he couldn't do it because of the construction of the instrument. I don't know. Tony, you wanted to, I mean,
yeah, right.
Yes,
out of discussion.
But Johnny wanted to tell us something. He raised his hand.
Can we go Johnny, then Hans Günther, then Professor Stahnke? I'm sorry, I'm watching this.
Okay, so what I think much of the scholarship represents from you, Ralli, and you can tell me if I'm explaining it wrong or incorrect, but the outside world, rather than calling him the outsider, the outside world wants a understanding of what his stuff looks like. Right? His stuff is designed to make the music, not to educate multiple people with his kabuki orchestra, where every instrument is not in a different tuning, but in a different notation. But my perspective, of course, is a little different as a vocalist, and I would just make these comments. I need to know these songs in my head without the viola. So I don't believe, and I don't have perfect pitch. We've discussed this before. Most of the people have had perfect pitch who performed Partch's stuff. I also, as another point, I hear the intonation being sung as not accurate to the ratios. Whether it's, I can barely do it now because it's early in the morning for me. That is my house. So that first that, which has I think an E flat written, is sung flat. The singer couldn't do it or had trouble doing it. But that's also a part of the intonation of the American English language, which is the third aspect. We always talk about how poetry translated doesn't work. So here we have poetry translated from Chinese to Japanese translator to English to American ears. And so when you write something like, I could not sleep, it's, how would you say the word sleep in English if it wasn't exactly pitched like that? That is the way we would say that. And in terms of the number of notes, thank you for pointing that out. It started at 29, then 43 was the diamond marimba. But in the springtime on the south side of the Yangtze Kiang, part of this collection, there are these pluses and minuses that give you 72 pitches. And more importantly than what they exactly are, is an indication that he wants his music to be even more tied into microtonal finesse. When I hear Harry sing his music, knowing the music, when he's got a little alcohol in him, you really can hear that he has a license that he gives himself, because he has perfect pitch too. He knows what he's doing. He gives him a license to take a note and make it a little higher, a little lower. So, the whole issue of notation, I would love to be seen in some of these other categorizations. That's what I have to offer.
Wow. Yeah. Hans Günther, please. And then Manfred.
Yes, my question is when Johnston transcribed the Harry Partch's pieces, did he use exactly the same system what we know from the string quartets, where he has these 7 pitches without any mark and then starts with the pluses and the minus for the syntonic comma? So of course that maybe it makes sense for these string quartets, but of course it is sometimes really hard to recognize and to read. Or what do you think? Have you tried also Helmholtz-Ellis just intonation notation?
We lost him.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe the connection. Should we go to the next question or Eleni?
Yeah, just a comment to Johnny. There is also this kind of, the time is not enough to see all the comments, but one of the comments is kind of, something I was unsure. I'm not sure it's about that song. So I heard the recording, and the recording, he doesn't sing what it's written. And the other one answers, yeah, he was tired that day. And I mean, it's kind of, you don't know which is the authentic source, what you can base yourself, but maybe that is not important as well. Because it's exactly what you say, it should accompany the voice. And my mother tongue is Greek, and if I sing an English text, I will have completely different intonation. And of course, yeah. But he was the authority, he was allowed to do it, not as written, but I don't know if other people are allowed to do it. So, yeah, please, next question.
One small comment from my side.
Yes, please.
Yes, music is a lively thing, and every day is a different day. So he was allowed to do what was really appropriate for this day. So I understand Johnny completely. He had absolute pitch, but he had absolute pitch which was far away from what he wrote, because it was this day where he presented his much more than 43 steps. You know that he wanted to kill John Cage because John Cage wanted to fix him, Harry Partch, on 43 steps. And this is exactly what Harry said, I will kill John Cage because of this fixation. So, Johnny Reinhardt, now, I completely understand you. This is lively music, and when he sang, he was lively, and there is this complete freedom in what he is doing with his own stuff. So, Ralli is your name, yeah? Ralli, I understand.
Eleni is my first name.
Eleni.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the other way around.
No, it's okay, yeah, because it's reversed.
Yelena, yeah, Greek. I should know Yelena. Yes, I am completely with you. So he loved alcohol, and it was a new day for him, and so he did his versions, and we have his wonderful versions, and this is authentic.
I have like a question, and I will come back to you. First of all, I know, and Johnny knows, that he killed his instrumentalist to do the right thing. I mean, extensive hours of rehearsal. He composed for himself, and then he wanted other people to play in the same level. So he was cruel into that, but when he performed, it could be like, not exactly. So I'm not sure about that. To come to the question of the instruments are reconstructed. John Schneider has a subset of those. Ensemble Scordatura in Amsterdam has a subset of those, and they are all constructed by Ensemble Musikfabrik in Cologne. So there are like 2 sets in US, as far as I know. The complete set of the original plus the ones that John Schneider has, and there are 2 sets in Europe, the complete set by Ensemble Musikfabrik, which is actually the newest set, exists only for 7 years, and 1 subset by Ensemble Scordatura in Amsterdam, and I don't know if others exist as well that I don't have knowledge of. Yes, but still, that does not make them accessible, because you know that they are huge. They are in storerooms. I mean, you cannot have access on them. You have to bring them out, have someone spend some hours to tune them. The guitars have like each 72 strings. Okay, let's say that the percussion instruments are easy because you have the blocks, the wooden blocks, so they are tuned or not, but it's not easy to have access on the instruments. I mean, you really have to be able to understand at some point before getting to the instrument. And I knew that American Mavericks had a stimulation of playing on those instruments, but they took it out. I cannot find it anymore. I mean, since some months.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me, Eleni. I'm always the mean person here. Do we have time? We have 2 minutes for the last question. Maybe Hans Günther wants to finish the question, please.
Yeah, sorry, I disappeared I forgot to connect my computer to the power supply. And what do you think about Helmut Ellis just intonation notation, what mostly has been used by Mark Sabat, and he also Sabat used it together with writing the ratios and descent system, so that you have 3 different information, and everybody who likes one of these can gather as just a transcription for reading and understanding. Of course, in parallel, we need also, I think, the tablatures because it's much easier to play, I suppose. So, as also my experiences with Bohl and Pierce shows that I have 2 different versions of my scores.
I am actually I understand more the Helmut Ellis jazz intonation, and I use it. That's why on purpose I didn't show you a transcription of mine. I showed you one from the 80s and one from the 90s. The thing is, and that's why I don't want to go, if we decide that we do this work, which is another question, which is more accurate, first of all, and the second for me, it's which is easier. I mean, I realize that whenever we are playing, the levels of complexity make it easier as a sight reading or not. I mean, this is also not only the tonal, but also in the rhythmical level. And for me, ideal would be something that gives the important information at first sight. Because if you have to read like levels of microtonal different notation, plus the ratio, plus the sense, and you have articulation, and then you really need, of course you have to invest, but it's more time to decode, and it doesn't make it easier. Then you go to Partch notation and you try to figure yourself out, because you add multiple levels more difficult than the ones that Partch actually have, and we try to kind of facilitate that, not make it more complex. But this is an open question for me, and that's why I'm presenting that, because I didn't find a solution to say, yes, this is the right way, we're going to take the music like that, and it's everything okay, everybody can understand it. So, open question.
I totally agree with you.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry, this conversation is really instructive and very enjoyable, but unfortunately we have to continue. We are 1 minute over, and I will thank you very much, Eleni. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
But
you.
we will remain with Harry Partch for the next item. His from Monophony to Melo-Harmony, how Harry Partch influenced Manfred Stahnke, and there's another link to Manfred Stahnke, and we welcome Navid Bargrizan. Navid?
Yeah.
Navid, here. We welcome Navid Bargrizan. Hello. And to present him, nearly all of Navid Bargrizan's compositions explore intonational and unique concepts. Since 2014, his experiments with microtonality have resulted in 15 premieres and about 50 performances of his work in North America and Europe. For his woodwind quintet tuning exercise number 1, Navid was a finalist in the American Prize for Composition, and the same prize also selected him as finalist for his piece Se Thahargah, his piece for microtonal adjustable guitar in its 2020 editions. Navid Bargrizan's research projects have led to several publications in USA and in Germany, Austria, Canada, and Turkey. He has presented aspects of his research at approximately 35 international conferences. Navid worked as a visiting assistant professor of music composition, as well as adjunct lecturer of general humanities and German language in the University of Florida. In this institution and Universität Hamburg, he earned MA and 3D degrees in music history and literature, and music composition, theory and technology, systematic musicology, and art history. Since August 2019, he serves as an adjunct professor of music at Texas A&M University of Commerce and instructor of German language and Dallas Goethe Center. A busy man, and welcome to our symposium. The item will be from Monophony to Melo-Harmony. Harry Partch influenced Manfred Stahnke.
Thank you so much, Johannes, for your introduction. Let me also express my gratitude to Augustin and other colleagues in Salzburg. And it's great to see so many familiar faces and friends here. And let me just say before I begin that it's a privilege for me to present this paper because of 2 reasons. First of all, exactly a week ago, Harry Partch became 120 years old on June 24th. And the second reason is that Manfred Stahnke himself is here. He's not only composer and musicologist, but the person who triggered my interest in Harry Partch about 12 years ago. So I look forward to your feedback, everybody. Would you please tell me if you see my screen?
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Just give me please 1 second. I went too far. Okay, great. Harry Partch's tuning and intonational theories have not only affected American composers of microtonal music, such as Lou Harrison and James Tenney, but also European microtonalists, including Georg Friedrich Haas and Wolfgang von Schweinitz. Yet no other European figure has absorbed Partch's ideas more than the German composer Manfred Stahnke, who came to the United States in 1979 to study at the University of Illinois with Partch's friend and supporter Ben Johnston. This paper approaches Partch's rebellion not as an isolated paradigm, but in relation to Stahnke's aesthetic and music, who has also sought to expand the intonational and tuning paradigms of Western art music. As Partch did, Stahnke has rejected the dominance of 12 tonical temperament, grappling with just intonation, as well as non-Western and ancient tuning systems. The analysis of the aesthetic decisions, compositional procedures, and microtonal structures in Partch and Stahnke's works articulates the strong link between both composers. In their works, microtonality goes beyond functioning as a mere formative element. It becomes a means to mediate their cultural discourse on the limited scope of the commercialized Western art music. I demonstrate that Partch's theory of microtonality, particularly his concepts of tonality diamond, O-tonality, and U-tonality, has influenced Stahnke's opera, Der Untergang des Hauses Usher from 1981, and his instrumental pieces, Diamantenpracht from 2005 and Partch Zither from 2007.
Excuse me, Navid, a small interruption. Are you okay that we see 4 pages of your presentation?
Yeah.
Yes, that's just one page with 4 sections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's great. Thank you, Augustine. Okay, Partch's 43 tone to octave scale, based on just intonation, not only substantiates his unique instruments and style of writing for voices, but it's also firmly entrenched in his idealized Greek and non-Western ancient rituals and closely related to his music philosophical standpoints. Contemporaneous critics tended to focus on Partch's microtonal scale, ignoring its aesthetic foundation in ancient Greek, Chinese, or non-Western musical cultures, a fact that Partch objected to repeatedly. Rejecting the controversial idea of the absolute dependency of his aesthetic on his scale, Partch states, "News stories and even reviews have almost consistently latched onto the number 43, as though this were somehow the touchstone of my life. It's totally misleading. Even on instruments of fixed pitch, I do not necessarily limit myself to 43 just monophonic tones." Partch did exploit various possible pitches in between the 43 tones on his fretless instruments, such as the adapted viola. He also used common wind instruments such as clarinets and trumpets in his works. Partch's early works, often called speech music pieces, substantiate his style of writing for voices as close as possible to human speech. His over-exaggerated microtonal scale was a necessity, a tool for him to capture the inflections of the human speech, the subtle inflections that the 12-tone equal tempered scale does not capture. For instance, we can see that in Partch's 1943 composed piece, The Letter, in this case performed in 1972, shortly before his death by Partch himself.
To my wife, and she broke it open and read it and sent it to me this morning. Well, I came back to East and run into a shotgun wedding, and I was the gold.
Partch's affection for ancient Greek instruments served as a model for him to build a new monophonic, just tuned intonational system using the simple ratios of the harmonic series up to the 11th harmonic. He built several original instruments based on his extended just intonation, which applied the possibilities of the overtone and undertone series realized through his concepts of O-tonality and U-tonality in his 11-limit tonality diamond. Parts terms O-tonality and U-tonality refer respectively to a collection of pitches of a harmonic series, analogous to major tonalities, as in the common period harmony, and a collection of pitches of a subharmonic series, an exact inversion of a harmonic series, analogous to minor tonalities. Partch designed this arbitrary two-dimensional diagram called tonality diamond, where one dimension presents the O tonalities and the other dimension the U tonalities. The intonational system demonstrated in the tonality diamond presents the harmonic and subharmonic just intervals stemming from unison with the ratio 1:1 within an octave with the ratio 2:1, expanding the 5 limit to the 11 limit intonational system. In Partch's tonality diamond, O tonalities appear between solid lines from left to right, and the U tonalities between dotted lines from right to left. For example, the ratios of just minor sixth or 8:5 O tonality are 9:5, 5:5, 11:10, 6:5, and 7:5. The line of 6 ratios demonstrates the maximum number of consonances that are achieved by expanding the identities 1, 3, 5 of the 5 limit system to 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 of the 11 limit system. Part's 11 limit just intonation, therefore, makes hexads possible instead of triads. This harmony system is the foundation of Part's instruments, particularly those instruments that he was able to tune precisely. Although Part's just 11 limit intervals and his 43-tone scale underpin his music, he rarely employs microtonality as just intoned harmonic intervals, unless his choral melodian, a redesigned pipe organ, sounds, or if relatively static moments of 2 vertical just intoned pitches appear. Part's music often sound as a constant percussive pattern, interrupted with microtonal glissandi and barely just intoned, even though 11 limit just intonation underpins Part's conceptual and acoustical terrain because of the clashes of the timbres, various instrumental techniques, limitations of certain instruments, and oftentimes fast and percussive rhythmical pattern, it's difficult to perceive the resulting sound as just intoned. Some quote unquote strange intervals emerging from simultaneity of rich layers of microtones often hinder our perception of the pure or just ratios. For instance, in Part's magnum opus from 1966, The Delusion of the Theory, you can hear these constant percussive patterns interrupted by microtonal glissandi and barely just intoned sounds, in this case, performed by Ensemble Musikfabrik. Part's just intonation system, particularly the concepts of O-tonality and U-tonality, as well as his strange intervals, influenced Stahnke's Melo-Harmony constructions. Stahnke has coined the term Melo-Harmony to refer to vertical and horizontal structures in an open microtonal field, not bounded by any traditional melodic and harmonic concept. His approach to microtonality, although influenced by Partch, exceeds the framework of just intonation. Since he uses a variety of scales and intonational systems, the range of his microtonal procedures is more complex than those of Partch. In his chamber opera, Der Untergang des Hauses Usher, Stahnke employs microtonal structures based on just intonation to evoke a web of psychological issues implied in Edgar Allan Poe's plot, such as hypochondria, hysteria, and melancholia, as well as its grotesque aspects, for instance, incest, vampirism, and horror. The dramatic narrative of the opera relies on microtonal configurations. Stahnke's peculiar harp tuning stands at the center of the microtonal construction in Usher. The harp represents an image of the old pleasant days of the house of Usher. Its microtonal tuning, however, the dissolution of 12 tonical temperament, symbolizes the relentless decay of the house of Usher, which throughout the opera is collapsing. Stahnke intertwines the harp's metaphorical tuning in the narrative of Usher. His harp tuning rests upon just major thirds and just major sevenths. This system gives birth not only to just intervals in O-tonality and U-tonality, producing a different sound effect than the harp's usual tuning, but also to idiosyncratic proportions generated through using harp's pedals that are capable of sharpening and flattening each single note in all octaves. These extraordinary proportions would fall under the category of strange intonation, a term coined by Stahnke to refer to Partch's intonational practice, which, although based on just intonation, often does not sound just. Stahnke sees the tonal contradictions embedded in his harp tunings as much as the just intervals on which it rests. He relates these contradictions to Partch's strange intonation as follows. In several of my pieces, the harp's tuning demonstrates a contradiction imposed by a sort of tonal falseness. In this tuning, the tones are only in a specific context just intoned. Suddenly, the intervals are not just anymore, because by using pedals, I work with 21 tones per octave. There, I build a strange intonation, which I actually learned from Partch. Partch's music is rarely just intoned. It largely projects a sort of a strange intonation. Many of his instruments, such as cloud chamber bowls or marimba eroica, do not really sound just, although they sound wonderfully. He could not tune them according to just intonation precisely. Such complicated, strange intonations appear through my harp tuning. As Stahnke implies, he embraces the inexplainable tonal proportions emerging from the harp's microtonal tuning, as Partch does in his own music. O-tonality and U-tonality respectively stand for the old days and the present days of the usher's house, metaphorically relating these acoustical structures to the element imposed storyline. For instance, in this section of the opera, as Usher sings about the pleasant smell of the flowers, we hear an O-tonality. As soon as terror appears in his face, we hear a U-tonality. However, the harp's just tuning, O-tonality and U-tonality inform merely the first and second layers of Stahnke's microtonal construction in Usher. He also integrates other layers of microtonality. He employs, for instance, an approximate equidistant pentatonic scale, which includes 5 equal intervals of 240 cents, circa a whole tone plus 6 tone per octave. Indonesian Slendro music or Baganda music in Uganda, for instance, make use of this scale, which Stahnke adopts in Usher. For instance, in this section of the opera, in the strings. As in several of his other works, in his piece for solo Zither, conveniently titled Partch Zither, Stahnke developed a scordatura, in this case based on 6-tone deviations from 12 tonical temperament. Using this scordatura, Stahnke synthesizes Partch's concepts of O-tonality and U-tonality throughout Partch Zither. The beginning of Partch Zither shows interlacing of an O-tonality construction above G and a U-tonality structure below A. Stahnke uses the intervals of just major third O-tonality and just minor seventh U-tonality between G, B, A, and F. B is not only a just major third above G with the ratio 5:4, but it's also a just minor seventh below A with the ratio 4:7. Likewise, F is a just major third below A with the ratio 4:5 and a just minor seventh above G with the ratio 7:4. Stahnke uses the strings based on 6-tone deviations to reach the 7th and 11th harmonic above the G O tonality and the related undertones below A U tonality. The related undertone is the E flat on the raised C string, the 11th harmonic below A with the ratio 8:11. I'm going to play for you the music from measure 8 to measure 13. Okay, great. Stahnke's piece for solo harp, Diamantenpracht, also incorporates the same harp tuning that he developed in 1979, used in his stage work Usher. Ironically, while using this tuning, a significant amount of bidding or impurity occurs through the harps stacked up just for the pure intervals. For example, 3 just thirds on top of each other, notated in harp strings as B sharp, E, G sharp, and C, result in an octave approximately a 5th tone, about 42 cents lower than 2-to-1 octave. Based on this phenomenon, in Diamantenpracht, Stahnke constructs strange micro-harmonies, as Partch does consciously and times inevitably in his music. He borrowed the title Diamantenpracht from Heinrich Heine's poem Lyrisches Intermezzo in Buch der Lieder from 1827. Robert Schumann set this poem to music in his 7th Lied from Dichterliebe in 1840, where he focuses on the metaphor of diamond. Stahnke's Diamantenpracht, or diamond splendor, alludes to Partch's tonality diamond, as well as the concepts of O tonality and the U tonality. The first 2 measures of Diamantenpracht contain an O tonality construction above C or B sharp up to the 11th harmonic F sharp. In measures 7 and 8, Stahnke builds a U tonality construction under F sharp with the ratio 1:4 to 5:7. This is the case also in measure 9 with its U tonality construction under D. In fact, all the next measures through measure 23 demonstrate U tonality structures using different transpositions that the harp's pedals make possible. Then, in measure 24, another O tonality appears, this time on B. Such O tonality and U tonality constructions directly related to Partch's tonality diamond substantiate the Diamantenpracht. They demonstrate how Partch influenced Stahnke and how Stahnke integrates Partch's concepts in his work, in this work, as well as in Partch's Zither, his theatrical music, and other pieces that we have not discussed. Partch found Western dramatic music drained from its ritual and corporeal roots. He reacted against the specialization inherent in Western art as well as in academies. He also viewed 12-tone equal temperament as inferior to just intonation. His effort to theorize an intonational system based on just intonation informed his revolt against 12-tone equal temperament. All intertwined aspects of Partch's inventions become means to delineate the philosophical and psychological crux of his works, in turn facilitating his polemical stance toward Western art. On the surface, the microtonal constructions in Stahnke's works merely depict their philosophical and psychological implications. But like in Partch's works, they also mediate Stahnke's polemics about the limited reach of the commercialized Western art music. To expand its tonal scope, Stahnke synthesized just intonation and diverse tuning systems and scales taken from non-Western cultures in his dramatic and instrumental works. In sum, all musical, theatrical, and technological elements of Partch and Stahnke's music convey their cultural criticism. But two elements inform the link between Partch and Stahnke more than anything else. First, both sought to reform Western conventions by looking at non-Western and ancient cultures. Second, their curiosity for microtonality, tuning, and intonation guided their research. Stahnke's flexible, inclusive, and hybrid aesthetic differs from Partch's rigidly crafted world of one tuning system and a single central aesthetic as his key principle, however. For several of Stahnke's instrumental and music theatrical pieces contain, however, elements taken directly from Partch's theories. His works represent one of the most significant cases of the vast influence of Partch's theories on the European counterpart. Thank you.
Thank you, Navid.
My pleasure.
It was a great pleasure for us too, and it was interesting to hear the connections you made. And I'm curious if Manfred agrees with your interpretation of his works, and we will ask him afterwards. Perhaps there are some questions around who wants to take part in the discussion. Some questions to the last lecture. Oh, are there so much participants now? That's all?
Yes, we are 30 now. I'm sure that Manfred has something to say. I mean, we are very curious about his reaction.
Yes.
I mean, it's a great opportunity to have really this blog and to have you so well connected. So we leave you.
We may discuss directly with that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Augustine. And especially now, Navid, for his talk. Of course, I really am very much obliged to you. I didn't know some weeks ago that we both appear in this ecumenic conference, so it's just very lovely for me to hear the talk of Navid. Yes, of course, Navid is completely right, since we discussed, I think since 10 years, you said, Navid, all these things. And by the way, Navid brought me to a microtonal concert, which was not Harry Partch, but which was Mohammad Reza Shajarian, a wonderful, great singer from Persia. And I think this was our early time when we got into contact. And later we will talk a little about Persian music, since this is what Navid mentioned, true for me, the interconnectability of many, many musics all over the world. They must not be in this true sense microtonal, but they are rich in tonalities and scales and concepts. And I know, and Navid mentioned this, that Harry Partch really was in this way of thinking very, very deeply so. He had parents who had been for a long time in China. They just came back to, I think, California or Arizona. I'm not sure where he was born, before his birth. So he had many informations about China and about music from all over the world. I think, Navid, it was his mother who was really very musical and took him, the little Harry, near to the music of the world. And so it was his mother milk somehow, I may say so, that the world is not only Western music, but it's really very rich. Yeah, and again, Navid, great thanks to you to raise this question and we have a Harry Partch set up. Jelena just started, and now we have you, and Harry Partch is very much in the air today. I have this feeling.
Yes, thank you so much, Manfred. Yeah, as I said, it's a coincidence that exactly a week ago, on June 24th, was his 120th birthday. And you are right, he was born in Arizona, I think, but then both of his parents were missionaries in China for quite a while. And then when they came back, before Harry was born, and then when they come back, they sort of transferred, but also very much interested in music, of course, as you mentioned. So they transferred this curiosity and sort of broadening the horizon and our limited sort of views to Partch, definitely. I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Sorry, but why?
Blomstead.
Can you start again? We were muted. The question.
A question again. The day of birth from Harry Partch was the 4th of June. You said, is it right?
24th of June.
Yeah, 24th, not the
120th
of June.
His 120th birthday, right?
So I thought it could be Bloomsday, but it's 20 days later. Okay.
Yes, Hans Günther.
But why Wikipedia says that he was born in Oakland, California? Maybe there's a mistake.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe Eleni has a better idea. I remembered seeing his birth certificate at the archive at the University of Urbana-Champaign. So a copy of his original or a copy of his birth certificate. Vaguely, I remember he was born in Arizona. Am I right, Eleni? Do you know that exactly?
I also know Oakland, to be honest, but I would have to see the birth certificate again. This is kind of question. I'm not sure exactly. And then they bought a house somewhere in Arizona. Actually, I think he bought Burston. I'm not sure. And they were transferred when he was really small. Actually, the very interesting fact is that he thinks that he was conceived while his parents were in China. And he's going to that story, but he was born two years later after they were returning. But he's saying everything that the inspiration comes from being conceived in China, which is actually not accurate. But he wanted to believe that he has this kind of. I can text you. I can back to you.
I appreciate that. I looked at, spent a month to look at archival materials in 2016 in Illinois, University of Illinois, and then in San Diego, his manuscripts. But Hans Günther, vaguely I remembered Arizona. It might have been Oakland, California, and then shortly after that they moved to Arizona. So either Wikipedia is wrong, or my memory is wrong. I'm sorry about that.
Any more questions in the group?
We have about.
10 minutes. The time in
10 minutes.
Yeah, we were 1 minute.
We made discuss about Harry Partch and his notations, and
I think Victor has a question. Is it?
Yes. As far as I understand the music of Harry Partch and his concepts, it was essential for him to develop some musical instruments able to produce the proper pitches and the proper timbres. How much do you think it is essential to use Harry Partch instruments, original ones or faithful copies, to reproduce his music? Maybe this is also a part of his tradition, And I hope we will not hear romantic piano covers of Harry Partch or bandoneon covers. We would rather listen something close to original pitches and original timbres. Okay.
Thank you, Victor. Yes, I think it's totally essential. I mean, by just looking at the squad of, I don't know, about 50 instruments that he built, we can acknowledge that it's essential to Partch's existence, his music instruments, it's sort of a music designed from the scratch. Not only the music philosophical aspect of that, but also the music theoretical, but also building the instruments, singing, composing, singing, performing. So actual corporeality, that's the term that he uses, this presence of all aspects of human physical and mental possibility in creating art as a reflection. So it's essential, definitely, but it's ironic that many of his instruments can't be tuned, and he knew that perfectly. He has written about that, can't be tuned according to just intonation. I think Eleni also mentioned that the percussion instruments, cloud chamber bowls, for instance, it's just interesting random pitches. I also quoted Manfred in my paper along the same lines, basically. So some of his instruments, like now the quadrangularis reversum, for instance, or choromelodian, they are exact pitches to some extent, but then when you see all these percussion instruments, smaller pieces, they are not tunable, basically, according to just intonation, or it just makes great sounds. He also used all these sort of random materials, like, I don't know, the liquor glasses and glasses from chemical labs and stuff like that. But to what extent they should be heard on his original instruments, that would be the ideal case. Absolutely. I mean, Harry Partch's music, for the most part, is written for these instruments, and it should be heard on them. Yeah, there are adaptations for other instruments and stuff like that. They are perhaps less effective, but that's just my sort of subjective interpretation to the last part of my answer to the last part of your question, basically.
May I ask you, Navid, what do you think, or I mean, for both of you, if I may, or three of you, Eleni, as well, what do you think that if Harry was still alive, what would he had preferred?
In what sense, Agustin?
Of the instrumentation on a version. I mean, if he was alive today, do you think he would have, do you have a feeling about what would be an ideal interpretation for him with the instrumentation?
That's a curious, good question. Maybe I would leave that to Manfred and Eleni. It's hard for me to say. I mean, based on what he's written, he was really sort of stubborn about what he wanted all the time. Stubbornly looked for the exact same thing for the most part. So that would be my sort of response. But maybe Manfred and Eleni could answer that question better.
I mean, he had a letter to Betty Freeman saying that there will be no continuation of him or the music, but he hoped the spirit after he died. And Betty, in this oral history tapes, and I believe it as well, did not believe that, because he was specific in the later pieces. He wrote a lot of performance notes. He wanted the music to be performed. He's doing a will where he applies Stanley Mitchell. They have the Harry Partch Foundation, so he really wanted to be performed, and he really wanted to improve the instrument. He got a Guggenheim scholarship to kind of automatize the chromelodion, which of course went to his personal expenses because he went ill in the meantime and he had to survive and he was drinking. And although he had a pretty modest life, but he said in many letters, especially to people that ask for records or you want to study by him, that the instrument is constructed 9 times because it's not working and I have to improve and I have to improve the material. And he was aware of that. And the the school was aware of that. That's why the first priority was to reconstruct the instrumentarium, because the music is absolutely dependent on the instruments. You said that very right, Navid, that it's this concept of corporeality. It's not only music, it's the size, the architecture of the instrument, the light on stage. He has also external lighting to have the shadows and recreate the movement, the dance, the speech, everything is applied. You cannot do it without the instruments. And he didn't want that, but if I may say one last thing concerning what did I want to say on that. Yes, I think that he wanted to keep being performed, and he actually went in this direction, but during his life he didn't let anyone else either compose of the instruments or have control. And it's very interesting for the wind song and also for the petals, which is the preparation of his bigger theatrical work Delusion. To do the recording, he recorded himself playing all the instruments, and then they taped them on the. And then he realized that this kind of one-man project has limitation, that you need other people. And he said, "I compose for me," and that's why he was harsh on the rehearsals. He wanted to be able to perform everything on his own, because he had the absolute truth of his performance. And this is also, I mean, for all of us composers, I think for me, it's my prior occupation. We need people, we need musicians, we need other people to interact. And if he could not have other people to interact, I think he would be very, very happy. But he realized at some point that he need for performances, he cannot do everything on his own.
Yes, and Eleni, this is true from the very beginning of his work creating instruments. Remember Ben Johnston and his wife Betty in the late 40s. He needed musicians, and these both ones, Ben and Betty, came to him to perform his early music. And all his life long, he collected mainly students around him to perform the Bewitched and whatever. And also the Delusion. Navid said his opus magnum. Yes, this is true. But who performed these things? These were composers like, I remember Dean Drummond. They learned from scratch to really perform on these instruments. I remember now Dean Drummond, and this refers to a question which arose some minutes ago. I visited one of the very last concerts Dean Drummond gave in Boston with the original Harry Partch instruments. And I saw the Musikfabrik Nordrhein-Westfalen in Bochum when they gave the Delusion of the Fury. And so I can compare these sounds from the original instruments and from these rebuilt instruments. And I must say that the original sound gives me much more warmth. It may refer to the redwood trees, to the surrounding, to the original wood. Do you say woods? He used from the sequoias, these big trees. And what the Musikfabrik, for example, is doing, they do it very clean. They have a very clean sound with his instruments. And I have the feeling that Harry Partch never wanted to come close to clearness, but to richness, to warmth, to a personality of his instruments. And this refers to what Navid mentioned, the corporeality, to the overall unity of doing the music, composing, building within a Californian surrounding. This all belongs together. And for me, I think Hans Gunther arose this question, it was Augustine who asked, what would be the best thing for Harry Partch now to have his music? I think it would be close to his own instrumental sound.
Yeah, thank you very much for your thoughts.
If I may answer very short to that, I think he would rebuild the instruments like 50 more times. I'm pretty sure that he would. Yeah, so we don't know the sound. I mean, he optimized whatever he could during his lifetime, but he was aware that there are defaults and they should be. He was not an instrument maker. I mean, he tried out, but he would continue developing the instruments. And this is important to see, like, if he still was alive in 120 today, would he really have the same instruments?
And it's very difficult to tune them like a big guitars. I wonder if Harry Partch himself tuned them. The a lot of strings of the guitar. It is a great task.
Todd, I'm sorry, we have maybe, I mean, we're over time. Maybe one last question from Todd, please.
Oh, that was a very beautiful picture from Manfred Stahnke. Thank you. It's not really a question, but just continuing on that thought that I think the maverick American composers like Harry Partch, Conlon Nancaro, okay, Mexican-American, certainly John Cage, they had no choice but to build their own instruments because, for example, with the percussion works, percussionists at that time were classically trained or jazz, and they were not at all interested in performing these avant-garde, very strange works that were not part of the orchestral tradition. So Harry Partch learned, and I saw a film of him playing, and he seemed to be very, very adept at playing percussion, not only cello. And John Cage had bookbinders and other dancers learning his challenging percussion works. So I think that they were forced to find alternative people to join them in their unusual artistic visions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry, we are 2 minutes over, and we continue with the same group.
I believe it won't be necessary to introduce Manfred Stahnke, you know him best, but I want to read some parts of his life. He was born in Kiel in 1951. 1966, he started to study piano and violin at the Musikakademie Lübeck, and he studied there composition and music theory too. In the year 1970 to 74, he went to Freiburg to Wolfgang Fortner, a very famous composer in these days, and Klaus Huber, his successor, and his then assistant, Brian Farneyhough. Manfred began a parallel study of musicology with Professor Dr. Hans-Heinrich Eggebrecht and others. He passed his exam in composition and music theory in 1973. The next year on, he continued his studies in composition and musicology in Hamburg with George Ligeti and Konstantin Floros, finishing with a PhD degree at the Hamburg University. The subject of his thesis was the aesthetics of Pierre Boulez. 1979 to 80, he went to the USA to study microtonality and computer music, first in Urbana, Champaign with Ben Johnston, you know that already, and John Malby. At Stanford in summer course with John Chowning. Then from 1983 on, he was a teacher on the Hochschule for Musik und Theater Hamburg, first in music theory, then also in composition, and from 1995 on as a full-time professor. Stahnke's works have a strong basis on microtonality, you know that all, and positive rhythms, also in improvisation. Among several opus, you know already The Fall of the House of Usher, and others, Henry IV opus, Orpheus Crystal, orchestra pieces, and a lot of chamber music. He wrote numerous essays about many musical questions and published several books. Some of them are well known to you, like the 1001 Microtones, Musik nicht ohne Worte, of Ligetis Hamburger Pfaden, on the paths of Judge Ligeti at Hamburg. And my view on Ligeti and Partch, so Partch remains. 2017, a collection of his writings appeared. He was a lecturer and led masterclasses in many countries worldwide. Currently, he is working with aspects of a new tuning possibility for string players, as he himself plays with Viola, and just intonation as well as the Bowen Pierce scale, both as a composer and a player of Viola. Further, he is starting a just intonation piano cycle. Presently, he is the chairman of the music department of the Free Academy of Arts in Hamburg. Manfred, the theme today is just intonation, well known to all, possibilities in playing and hearing on string instruments, especially your instrument. Well,
yes. Thank you, Johannes, for the introduction. I think I will not give a talk in this sense, but I will just collect some ideas I have had from yesterday and from today, and will somehow focus on, of course, what Navid said and what I heard today. For example, I was very much moved by the talk of Pascal Criton and her ways to compose, to write, really a score, but then let the musicians kind of smell the possibilities which are inherent in what she is writing, or the possibility of swimming. I think that she gave us the picture of a fluidity, of a kind of ocean of many pitches, which are no pitches, but which are a kind of university of overcoming pitches. So I loved this very much, and I kind of I think to continue these ideas now Navid gave me and Eleni gave us in a direction which may kind of come close to my actual thinking now, since I am kind of split in between two worlds now, in the world of improvisation with my viola and of composing on paper. So maybe we can try to look at my screen. So Augustine, maybe you can give my screen now, which should be this one. I'm not sure what you can see now.
Yes.
Can you see? I will start from here. Okay. So it shows up on Zoom now. And as a little kind of reference now to Navid, I will start with what is very much in my mind just now, working with my viola. I am working on a cycle of etudes for myself about Persian music, about Persian dust gas, which is the term which is not widely known. We know the the term makam, which is not really what fits to Persian music. So I will stay to this Persian term dastgah. And I will give a short example This will be one of a very prominent dastgah in Persia, which is called Shur. I'm not sure, Navid, if it's pronounced properly. Please correct me if I make fundamental mistakes. And I want to be as simple as possible now and not go very deeply into the theory of Persian music, since it's very, very complex. It's lovely. And I was just want to show a basic approach which I kind of am walking kind of close to Persian music. So what I find in this overall dastgah concept, there are 12 dastgah in Persia, and Shur is maybe number one. What I find is that there is a closeness to the very old Greek music theory, since there is a basic Pythagorean thinking in the dastgah. You have, I call it, two superimposed Pythagorean chains of fifths. If you look at my example, you have the pitches C, D, F, G, and A, and they very, very much, or they fit into the Pythagorean system, since they are perfect 3-2. But the very interesting thing in Persia is that you have a distance system, and the distance will be around 160 cents. And again, we have a chain of fifths from B flat to E flat to A flat, and there are more like D flat, which is not apparent in the dastgah Shur. And they also give us a perfect 3-2 chain of fifths. Now, what is interesting for me is that the music I hear from great singers like the mentioned Shajarian, Mohammed Reza Shajarian. He's dead now, I think, 2 years. He died 2 years ago. But I heard, together with Navid and a good friend of mine, Sarvana Safari, a wonderful concert of his in Hamburg with his ensemble. And what I got from this music is a kind of loveliness, fluidity, even a watery atmosphere of possible pitches, since there are not only these pitches C, D, F, and so on, but every pitch is kind of changed all the time through singing. We had this question some minutes ago, when we, or some hours ago, I must say, when we discussed Ben Johnston's string quartets. Why is there always this kind of vibrato which the Kepler trio is using? Yes, if we reduce pitch to a pitch, it has no liveliness. And this is true for Harry Partch and Harry Partch's singing. Why is he so much deviating from the pitches he apparently wanted to write down, and the ratios he writes? No, it's the necessity of talking. Referring to Harry Partch, his music was not a mathematical construct, but it was um, a philosophy around human speech, the speech of the hobos, the simple people, the friends of his traveling through the US in the Big Depression in the 30s and 40s, where there was no money and they all had to travel to the orange orchards in California to earn some money. And he lived together with these hobos, these Landstreicher, we say in Germany, and he very much like other people, like Janacek, he wanted to write down what they were singing and talking. So the speech melody was very, very important to him, and this kind of flows into the LiPo songs. Libai songs, he should say, but he had the version LiPo, this very, very old and very, very famous Chinese poet from many, many hundred years ago. So, this is also true for Jajarian, the Persian music. You have not only the C and the D, you have these on the tar, and the sitar, these major instruments in Persia, for they are tuned very, very, very precisely. But they give, like the chromelodion in the Harry Partch instrumentarium, they give the pitch, and then the singer takes the pitch, and then he does something. And this is, for me, absolutely fantastic looking at Persian music. Persian music is not composed note by note, but it's kind of improvised. There is a wonderful writer about this Persian music, Hormuz Farhad. He's working in Dublin. I don't know how old he is now, but I have got a wonderful book of his Farhad, and if we can share all these titles later, I didn't write it down. And Farhad says improvisation is not a proper term for Persian music, for it's absolutely clear for a singer or for a player how the dastgah is functioning, is working. What are the pitches? For example, I gave some characters here, like the R and the F. Okay, Farhad took the term finalis from the Western world for the last pitch of a dastgah. This is, in this case, the D. But the A refers to the beginning of, let me keep to this term, improvisation. So you begin C D I, and then you go on, and you have a focal point. I call it focal point, or he calls it focal point of melodic activity. This is very simple, da bi ba yi, and this pitch interests me very much. This low or a little higher E flat. Can you see my mouse? I'm not sure what Zoom allows.
Yes, perfectly.
It's perfect. Okay, that's good. So you have a pitch which comes from a second layer of 3 to 2 fifths. You have the B flat, the E flat, and the A flat, which I mentioned, and they absolutely not fit into the chain of fifths which we have from C, D, F, G, A. They are proper in themselves. So we have a double layer of a concept of fifths. And what is more, for me, since I'm a Westerner and I hear this music, and hearing this music in my inner ear now, which I heard 10 years ago from Jajarian, this wonderful singer from Persia, is that this, we say anderthalb-Tonschritt, 1 and almost a half tone step, is very, very important in Persian music. And this is true also, of course, for Arabian music and for Turkish music. We have this ta-pa-yi-dam. It's an avoidance of our 100 cent half step, which we have in our system. Okay, the Persians know the limma. They have a small half step, we could say. I have written it here at the end, just before the B flat. You have the A, and in the Pythagorean system, we know it all. We have the limma. This is the Pythagorean half step. This also occurs in the Persian music. And looking at this A, I have to mention another phenomenon which interests me very, very much, since there seems to be a relation to our Western music, considering the minor genus. A-Moll, A minor, in the harmony, harmonisches Moll, we say. There is also a changeable pitch. We can sing, I just take a lower pitch. Da di 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 ya da 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 ya dam. So up we have pam pa pa, but down we have pa pa ya dim. I don't know if this derives from Old Greek music, maybe, but it is very apparent in Old Persian music. We have the motekaye, I don't know, Navid, how I should pronounce this properly. It's written motekaye, kaye with double Y. It's interesting. And it's these two possibilities. If I have a D, ba, D, D, then I can ba, ba, D, and I go down. I take this a little higher A flat. But if I go up, yam, ba, di, di, da, da, di, from the B flat, I must have the A. And I never use this A flat in accordance to the B flat. So there are, I say, locations for the specific pitches in a dastgah. And this gives a richness. And this richness comes before I in quotations, improvise. I don't improvise. I don't really improvise, but I use in deep, deep knowledge of the pitch world in its fixations towards what happens if I go up, if I go down, what are important pitches like the East, which is like what also we have as a tenor tone in the Western music. For example, if we have the Dorian mode, we could say sing ba ba da 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 di. This would be our tenor. Okay, in Shur, I didn't find this indication of East, so maybe Navid, we don't have a real East in Shur, in this dastgah East. But we have other pitches, and now I would love to end my little Ausflug, my little way away from Europe towards Persia with my little viola, and just give you a little acoustic idea of what interests me so very much. You start, I say, with the akkas, which is the starting point of a kind of improvisation. I start and then I have the D, and then and immediately we hear this kind of oriental music. Maybe it's very apparent in my ear now, but maybe you hear it also, and it reappears. And it reappears with the A flat, which is not our A flat again. And what is, for me, it's so very interesting, is that I found these ways of going away from our Western intervals. I found this also in Harry Partch. For if Harry Partch uses this 11 limit system. It's absolutely different, of course, now from the Persian music, but you have the just third, which is not apparent in Persian music. I have never read about this. There is no just 5/4 in Persian music. And that is not the real 12/11, which we have in Harry Partch. But there are intervals which are so interesting for me, which come close to 12/11 or 13/12. Harry Partch never did the 13/12, but we could go on. And Ben Johnston did this. So he used the 13 and many, many more, 17, 19, and so on. I find similarities between music of the world, not only Persian music, I will come to other examples, and Harry Partch. For example, let me just go on. I'm not sure how many minutes I am using here, and I don't measure my time now. For example, if you now see my second page, I refer to a indigenous people from Mexico in Veracruz, Tepehua, and I found a wonderful article about semantic signaling. There are priests. They, interestingly enough, they use the old violin, which, of course, came to Middle America through the Spaniards. But what they do is, for example, if they say God is close, they use a signal like. So this could be a signal. I am wrong, and I've not really now the remembrance of what are the true signals. We have to read this article. But the music these priests give to the people are always meaningful. If you have another interval, it means something different. But what I wanted to show you is what these priests are using. And I think they are kind of not aware of half steps, whole steps, what we know in European music. They just take their fingers and use kind of equidistant intervals, like. So we have a kind of neutral third in between, and these are intervals around 170 cents. Of course, we could find a ratio interval which comes close to this. But I don't want to say, okay, this could be close to 11 to 10 or whatever. It's just an additional world for me, and it gives me another possibility. This scale of we could say it's an equidistant heptatonic scale, also occurs in the Solomon Islands, Malaita, which is the island I love. I have never been on Malaita, but there is flute music, and they use the same scale, 7 in 1 octave, and the octave is not an octave. And if we look at the Tepehua music, it's not an octave. Again, it's the richness which we have to consider. If we have the let's really take a G, and we start here, kind of equidistant. Then we have a fifth, and we go on. And this has to be kind of changed, this G, which is not an octave. It's a wrong octave somehow. Okay, let me just jump to another island, Java, Indonesia, and we all are very aware of the Slendro scale, which people said, okay, it may come close to 8 to 7, and this always interests me very much. And I think I was triggered by Harry Partch thinking in ratio numbers like 8 to 7. Since 8 to 7 is a wonderful interval, it gives such a wonderful harmonicity through difference tones, apparently. And this is what I hear on my viola immediately, of course. And if we kind of consider these possibilities of Slendro close to 8 to 7, 231 cents, we end up with a playable scale on the viola like with the ganz tone, whole tone, too big. And we can do double stops, of course, with this wonderful interval, and again a very, very different kind of scaling. In this case, I subdivide the fifth by 3, and I don't know, I end up not with 231 cents but by a different value. We can all calculate this. And I used these kinds of scalings in very different works of mine, always hybrid. Navid mentioned some pieces of mine which relate closely to Harry Partch, like Partch at Zither or Diamantenpracht for harp. But very often I really go away from these ratio numbers. For example, it's kind of difficult to use ratio numbers in a field of Bohlen-Pierce. Yesterday, Hans-Gunther Lock told us about Bohlen-Pierce. This is a wonderful scale. I love it, and I improvise with this scale we all know now that it's 3:1 subdivided by kind of 13 equal or unequal steps. If we use Bowen-Pierce, and Todd Harrop also is here, he's also a specialist on Bowen-Pierce. If we use it in just intonation, we have unequal steps, and Bowen-Pierce allows us to go very, very close to these kind of just intervals. We have to consider that at the very basic or at the beginning of the creation of the Bowen-Pierce scale, we had 1 to 3 to 5 to 7, really simple ratios. And now I will try to retune my viola and give you, to have a last example, a Bowen-Pierce possibility on the viola. I have to go a little down, a kind of 1/6 of a tone for each tone. Now I keep the A. I have to
Excuse me, Manfred.
Yeah.
After this example, could we go to the question time after your next playing?
Okay, yeah, so we are out of time now. Yes, I will just retune this next... So, this would be my tuning for the Bowen-Pierce scale. And I have ratio numbers like 7 to 3 for and if there would be more time, I would then come closer to this 7 to 3 tuning. And of course, then I have the possibility to really play Bowen-Pierce music. I have to think a little bit about it and adjust my fingers, but you can see all these possibilities of changing our 100 cent half steps, 200 cent whole steps, give us a rich world of many more possibilities. And referring to Frank Redojewski yesterday, the main thing is to consider diatonic possibilities, diatonicity. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, and bravo! You're an extremely good singer too. Not only
Thanks so much for this concert.
Thank you. Yeah, there are surely will be questions and asking around. Is there some questions? So,
well, I had something I wanted to ask in the last session, but there was no time. And you, Manfred, brought up Partch again. So I hope, a little bit of some comment there. But I just first want to say, well, thank you as always when I hear you talk. It's music to my ears. But there's the fact that you had two different chains of fifths in sure.
In sure, yes.
Could be related to the fact that we, with our two hemispheres of brain, largely, we hear up differently than down. So like if we hear, here comes the bride, and that becomes the perfect fourth model, but then we need to have, this is the symphony, and we need that to do the perfect fourth down, because we can't do the perfect fourth up and then go down. We need to go directly to down. So down having its own chain different than up, to me is a beauty, in terms of what it's presenting. And then the Partch thing I wanted to tell you. and everyone, I was going to write it, but I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying with reading something. I don't know if, so I didn't send that, I don't think, is to think of Partch not in just intonation, but as just, in the sense that he's obviously not using harmonic tone. He can't make it clearer. And he's showing the imperfections as actually the variation of the judgment, which is also the context, you know, of the environment and his instruments, his sound, hearing it for himself primarily. So I was thinking of just in terms of the American meaning of honest is probably more appropriate to Partch specifically. That he wanted just sound, meaning he wanted an honesty to the sound. I mean, of course, he was hypocritical when he says no recording is good enough. And then he makes the first recording company.
It's wrong, yes.
Right? Gate 5. So, we have to take all these things in context. But I thank you, and I just wanted to add those points.
Yeah, and this is true for Ben Johnston also. You have the purity and you have the hell. You have both, and both is the truth. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any more questions in the group?
Perhaps.
Pascal?
Pascal.
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. I've been touched about your way to mention the smell, something that can be that can be felt between sound and also when you first talked about this speech intonative fluctuation, which is following culture, following individuals, following probably time. It's infinite. It's infinite. Infinite. How do you say in English? Infinite. It has no end, I think. And I like this idea of at the same time in the music we so much need to have markers, to make relation, to divide, but also there is in this speech matter there is something like otherness that is all the time to rebuild, to build something from something I think expressive, and that's this link between all the scaling and the relation we balance, and at the same time this this kind of otherness that I really appreciate, even in the way that you gave sound to be heard with your viola.
Yeah, thank you, Pascal, that you mentioned this again. For this is all about it. It's about contact, speaking to people. And music is mathematics, but it's not only mathematics. It's a kind of I think everything. Yeah, and it's undescribable, of course. We just have to do it with mathematics, but with our fingers also, and with our hammers, which Harry did, building his instruments. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You have a question?
I have a lot of questions, but we have no time to discuss this all. But Manfred, I hope we'll see once again, and so we can solve a lot of problems. They appear just now in comparing the music of Dastgah, Persia, and Arabic music in Indian. There are all connections between, but that's another theme.
Manfred, can I ask something personal that I'd like to know from you, because you just mentioned, and I have to add that I was since the beginning of Small is Beautiful 6 years ago. I was very much dreaming of this moment. So here's my question, and I'm very glad you just mentioned about this kind of improvised music. And of course, I have my own reasons, but I would like to ask you, why do you think that these kinds of improvised music works and is so needed and used, or even in your case or in general?
Oh, I don't know why. It's just I feel the richness. I don't know how many of us improvise music and just make music. You too, Augustine. Oh, thanks. So this is then your question is very understandable for me.
Not the instrument to do.
You find all these inflections of speech, speech possibilities, which Pascal just mentioned, in just doing it. If we have a little group, we talk to each other, and this richness, aside from paper, which we have to fulfill somehow, this gives a kind of inner hearing, and I really love this very, very much. Not forgetting the possibilities of focusing on science. This is also a possibility, but this is a very different world somehow. So I think we have to have both worlds of being very, very spontaneous somehow, and being speculative like an old monk writing science on paper.
Yes, let me say in these words, we are not only Homo sapiens, we are Homo ludens too.
Sure, yes,
and
we are.
that's joy. Nothing else.
Yes, so maybe more questions we can just write on the chat, and we can discuss. I'm sure we will have the chance. And congratulations for this blog to all participants. Congratulations to you, Manfred, for this lovely luxury to have you playing for me, luxury concert. Yeah.
And thanks for Navid. Navid was absolutely excellent and brilliant. Yes.
Okay, so we are going to stretch a little bit the legs, and we will see each other in 28 minutes.